since we mentioned Instagram,
Oh.
did you see what I did there?
Yes. Let's talk about the gram.
So we got some positive feedback on the last episode we did on the startup story of Twitch. And like I said, I want to do more of those. And today's episode, we're going to be starting off with the startup story of Instagram.
Oh, exciting. This is like totally giving you a tech boner.
Well, it's also more in your wheelhouse. You said last time, neither of us really used Twitch.
No, right. Yeah.
You, I know, love the Instagram.
Yes, I use it. I'm not as like up to date on how to use Instagram as like actual content creators and influencers know how. Honestly, like I don't even really know how to use stories or reels.
What do you mean actual content creators? Because
oh right, yeah,
you gotta start dressing for the part here.
I don't know. I don't know. I have what is it called? Imposter syndrome.
Well, we all do.
Yeah, most content creators.
But
do.
you are a content creator.
Sure.
I don't really like the word influencer. I'm not really trying to influence anybody.
Right.
But we're putting content out there.
Sure. Yeah. I created content in my day.
So there's actually a lot of similarities and some key differences between the Instagram and Twitch stories.
Okay.
And yeah, we'll talk about some of those.
Okay.
But to set the scene, I'm going to take you back to 2009.
Okay. Oh, the fashion there was interesting.
Okay, so your mind goes to fashion.
Yes.
What was the fashion of 2009?
Thinner eyebrows, longer tunic shirts, layered. Pretty sure bumpets were a thing.
What's
then.
a bumpet?
Oh please, I love like.
Oh, the hair thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's what I like still try to do with my hair. Infinity scarves, I think, made their debut in 2009, maybe the early 2000s. Oh, it was my jam.
All right. Well, I like that. That's where your mind goes when I mention a year.
No, yeah. What did I wear then?
Yeah. I know what I wore then.
The same thing you're wearing today.
I'm like, Doug, funny. So in 2009, a guy named Kevin Systrom was about 3 years out of college at Stanford.
Okay.
All right. So he's living in Silicon Valley still. And he worked for a startup called Next Stop.
Okay.
He's a product manager. Before that, he worked at Google, actually. And he was teaching himself how to code at night.
Oh.
So he wasn't an engineer. He didn't know how to code, coming out of college. So as he was teaching himself how to code, he decided he wanted to build an app.
Okay.
And he was interested in the check-in apps that were popular at the time. Like, do you remember Foursquare?
Yes. Yeah, and we talked about Foursquare, but yeah. So
Yeah.
that's like a check-in app.
Exactly. So yeah, we talked about Foursquare on a previous episode. It was a location check-in app. So
right.
basically you could let people know, hey, I'm here right now, and anybody else, any of your friends that were around could come meet up with you.
Right.
I think they gamified it, right? So you could be like the mayor of certain places.
Oh, yeah.
You remember that?
I forgot about that component of it.
Yeah, I never used Foursquare, but some of our friends were big into it, and
God, they checked in everywhere.
Yeah, they
like,
wanted to be the mayor of as many places as they could, or the king, or whatever.
I think it was the mayor.
Yeah.
That's
So
funny.
he thought that those were going to be huge. Like a lot of people did at the time, including venture capitalists. They put a lot of money into check-in apps. So he decided to create one of his own. And he named it Burbn. Burbn. Also big at the time was removing letters from the names of your startups.
I know. Why would you do that?
Well, I don't know. Probably, Bourbon spelled correctly was not available.
Right. That's actually a clever thing. Yeah, to make it trendy, to take out letters.
Yeah, exactly.
So that the domain.
Yeah, you need
exists.
the domain. I think this was a web app actually,
Okay.
and so he was into fine whiskey and bourbon, but the app had nothing to do with that.
Oh.
So it was a check-in app, and so the reason that these apps were becoming popular was because like we talked about with Twitch. The technology really just started enabling users to do this sort of thing.
Yeah, like geolocation.
Yeah, geolocation. So the iPhone had come out in 2007, so 2 years before. It was a new mode of communication, like sharing your location with people, real-time check-in, that sort of stuff. So he created this app on nights and weekends and put it out there for a beta. And signed up initially like 60 or so users, mostly family and friends and friends of friends, just to give it a try. And so it was just like Foursquare, except you could also add pictures to your location check-in.
Okay.
So let's say I'm at the local saloon.
Are we in like the Western, like old Western era?
And
You walk in with your spurs.
yeah, swing those doors open. And I take a picture of maybe all the taps that they have, or
the piano man.
the piano man, yeah, the spittoon.
Yes, yeah.
And I can post it on this app, Bourbon, and I can write a little tag about it,
Yeah.
and it says where I am. So
Cool.
maybe if any of my friends are around and they want to come by, they'll swing by and park their horse right outside and mosey on in.
Or if they want to have a shootout, they know where to find you.
Exactly, that's you. So shortly after launching, he decided to go to a bar where he knew that a bunch of investors were hanging out and meeting up with people who were starting startups.
I love how that there are bars that are known for that in Silicon Valley, only in Silicon Valley.
Yeah, it's pretty cool, huh?
Yeah, no, that's cool.
And he showed it to a guy, an investor named Steve Anderson. He showed him his app. And he was the only one that he talked to that was kind of interested in it. And he invited him to coffee to talk more about it. So they went out to coffee shortly after. And while he was showing him the app on his phone, he was getting all of these alerts. And Steve asked him what those alerts were. And he said, I programmed it so I get an alert every time a user signs up.
Okay.
And so at first Steve was like, are you just having people sign up
Right, yeah,
now
during
because
this
you're
time.
because you're having a meeting with me, like a lot of people?
Yeah, it's like a
and he's
plan.
like, no, I swear I didn't plan that. We just happened. He didn't really even know why. They maybe got like 5 or 10
Yeah.
signups at that time.
That's funny.
And so Steve was like, okay, I'm interested. Count me in for $50,000.
Dang.
But the catch is, I want you to find a co-founder.
Yeah. Accountability partner.
An accountability
That's what I'll call
partner.
it from now on.
Yeah. Startups are hard. They are much harder when you try and do them alone.
Yeah.
I think we've talked about this before too.
Yeah. Yeah.
So Steve knew that, and Kevin probably agreed. So he went out and he's looking for a co-founder.
Yeah.
So Kevin knew a guy named Mike Krieger
Okay.
from college. They were acquaintances in college, but he happened to run into him at another coffee shop in Silicon Valley. Because not only do you meet up with investors in coffee shops, you also just sit around and work and program in coffee shops in Silicon Valley.
I thought you were going to say, like, this is the coffee shop where most, like, potential co-founders are found.
I think that's any coffee shop,
Yeah.
Silicon Valley.
Yeah.
So Mike was a designer and an engineer at another company in Silicon Valley. And so Kevin just happened to run into Mike at a different coffee shop.
You sure he didn't see that he checked in on Foursquare?
No, I don't know. Maybe.
How strategic.
Kevin showed Mike the app that he was working on, Bourbon, and Mike thought it was really interesting. And they actually joined up and decided to work on it together. So he found his co-founder pretty quickly.
Yeah, he found his forever friend.
Yeah, well,
That's what I would call them.
that is one way to put it. It doesn't always work out that way for founders of startups, but we'll see how it goes for Kevin and Mike as
Ooh.
as the story
I'm
progresses.
so invested.
Yeah, it's a little hook.
Yeah,
I'm just
I know.
reeling you right in.
Right.
So Steve actually decided, the investor that he met decided to increase his investment to $250,000.
Now that he has a co-founder.
Well, he said he would only invest 50 if he got a co-founder, but
Yeah. Oh.
something caused him to change his mind. Maybe it was all those dings, and he thought
Yeah.
about it a little afterwards,
Yeah.
those alerts. And because in Silicon Valley, when one investor invests in you, it's like the sign for like like the sharks start
Yeah,
circling.
they smell the blood. in
Yeah,
the water.
exactly. There's like some chum out
Yeah,
there.
they're like, ooh, what's this?
And nobody wants to miss out, right?
Yeah.
So Andreessen Horowitz, one of the most famed investors in Silicon Valley.
Oh, I hear he's very handsome.
Okay, that's actually 2 last names.
Oh.
So which one are you talking about?
Both of them. Just trying to get on their good side.
So they decided to match that investment. They also invested $250,000.
Wow.
So these 2 guys had $500,000, Kevin and Mike, for basically a prototype with about 60 beta users. And so they got to work. And they worked on it for a few months. You want to guess how many users they got up to after a few months of working on
They
Bourbon?
started on like 60 as in a beta prototype, and in a few months,
Mhm.
1,000.
That would have been better. They got up to about 100 users after a few months of working
Is
on
that
Bourbon.
good? I don't know. Is that
No, that's
good or
not
bad?
good.
Okay, that's what I kind of thought, but I didn't want to say like, oh, and then you'd be like, no, you're not in the industry. You don't know.
Come on, May. You got to scratch and claw for every user. I mean, you kind of do at the early stages, but they had no momentum at all.
Okay.
They didn't know how to grow it.
Yeah.
And they realized that people didn't really even like the check-in feature of the app.
Interesting.
But what they did like was the photo sharing feature of the app.
Mm-hmm.
So they liked that they could take a picture somewhere and tag it
Yeah.
at a specific location.
Okay.
So they thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah.
And when Mike joined the company, that's actually the piece. So he was a designer. That's actually the piece that he was most excited about anyway.
Okay.
Was the photos.
Yeah, because he's a designer, the aesthetic part of it.
Exactly. Yeah. So a few months into working on Bourbon, they decided to pivot
Okay.
to a photo sharing app.
Mm,
It was still called Bourbon at
Okay.
first.
interesting.
And they were kind of burned out on trying to get traction for Bourbon and make it work. So Kevin and his then girlfriend, now wife, they decided to take a vacation.
Mm-hmm.
And while they were walking on the beach, Kevin actually got a pretty significant insight from his girlfriend Nicole. So he told her that they were going to pivot to a photo sharing app.
Mm-hmm.
And she actually really liked that idea because she said she liked seeing all of the photos people took and posted on Bourbon. But she also said, I probably won't post my own pictures, but I like looking at other people's.
Okay.
And so Kevin was like, why wouldn't you post your own photos? Like, don't you want to support my
Me?
app? And she was like, yes, I do. But, other people's photos just look so much better than mine.
Oh.
And she named somebody who happened to be one of their friends who was using the app. And Kevin said, well, he just uses a different app and applies filters
Right.
to make his photos look nicer. And then he posts them on Bourbon.
Right.
And she was like, oh, well, you should build that into Bourbon then.
Yeah. Oh, I see where we're going with this.
And that's where the idea for filters came.
yeah, on Instagram.
And
oh
what-
My gosh.
Shortly after this was renamed Instagram.
Wow. And that is like, that's the draw that got me onto Instagram, is like these cool filters that just like really heighten the photos that you post. I love that.
Oh, that's interesting. I didn't know that. So I heard in an interview actually that a lot of their early users didn't even realize that Instagram was a social network. They only used Instagram for putting filters, for applying filters to photos.
So did I.
Oh, really?
When I first got onto Instagram, somebody showed me like what it can do to your photos. And actually, I feel like if you go back to like my first photos, there's no captions or anything because I was literally just using it to filter photos and then send them to people.
And then post them on Facebook.
Well, but they post on Instagram, when you're done filtering
okay.
them, and I just never deleted them.
There's a couple reasons that they thought the timing was right for this photo app. So before this, if you'll remember back, hop in the Wayback Machine.
Okay. I'm gonna see what I was wearing at the time.
Social networks for photos were mostly done on the desktop. Do you remember before you could use your phone, you really had to take a picture with a point and shoot digital camera.
Digital camera, yeah, and you hooked it up to your
You
computer.
had to hook it up to your computer.
With the USB.
Yeah, transfer the files
Yeah.
and then upload them to Facebook,
Oh,
right?
for sure, yeah.
And that was slow and it was a pain. And I never did it because, one, I didn't take a camera everywhere. And two, I didn't have the patience for that. I know you did it.
Oh, absolutely. It's okay. I did it for you.
Yeah, you made albums and all that
Oh,
stuff.
yeah. It was a photo dump for sure.
So around this time was when the first phones were coming out that actually had a high quality enough camera.
Yeah, like a decent camera.
Yeah, to sort of not need a point and shoot digital camera anymore.
Right.
So the first few iPhones, even their cameras were pretty terrible.
Oh,
It wasn't until the iPhone 4 that could produce images that were high quality enough that you didn't have to take your camera around.
Do you know when the iPhone 4 was? Like what year?
The iPhone 4 came out in like mid 2010.
Okay. I don't remember exactly when I had a BlackBerry Pearl, but I remember thinking like it took really good pictures, and I had a lot of pictures on it that I would put on social media from my BlackBerry Pearl.
And when you look back at those now.
Oh my God, they were tragic.
So people were now, basically everybody, right, was now in possession of a device that could take good quality pictures, and they brought it with them everywhere they went.
Right, yeah. What a good time for this.
Yeah, and not everybody yet, but they knew that they soon would be, right? This technology was coming. It was only going to get more pervasive, cheaper. There were going to be some better options out there soon. And so they were banking on that. One of the other key decisions they made early on was not to follow a Facebook-like strategy of requiring users to be friends. So I reach out with a friend request, you accept it, then we're friends, I see your photos. They wanted it to be more open. So they went with a follower model instead of a friend model like Facebook, which really did open it up. They were the first to do it for a photo sharing only app, basically a photo first app.
Yeah, that's interesting. Because I remember when I first signed up for Instagram, I was hesitant with the either everything's public or you're super private. You can't be like, I liked how on Facebook you could have like you could filter the people that you share specific content with. But I understand that that's because there's so much more content that you can share on Facebook, like your personal information, the groups that and so you can filter every section of Facebook. Whereas for Instagram, it's really just pictures. I know that they have kind of like a more exclusive friends network that you can choose from and be a little bit more selective like that. But I was I didn't know what I wanted in terms of privacy. I didn't want to be completely private. I wanted to be searchable.
Right.
So I started with a public profile and I never changed since. It's just funny that that's what happened. And I remember being like, why aren't they like Facebook?
Yeah. And the default is what most users are going to use because most users aren't going to change it.
Right.
So by making it default open and public, they knew that most people were going to stay that way.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it only took them 8 weeks from the time they initially sketched out the kind of this pivoted app to when they launched on the Apple App Store. And they only launched on Apple at this time. So they launched in October 2010.
Okay.
That's when they launched the first version of Instagram. How many people do you think they got to sign up in the first day?
Well, if Bourbon got up to 100 users, I would think 150.
150 would have been decent. They got 25,000 people to sign up in the first 24 hours.
Holy moly. What was the marketing strategy there?
So Apple gives you 100 invites that you can send out through the App Store, or at least they did at the time.
Oh, interesting.
They used them to send to tech journalists, some designers that they found online that they thought might be interested in the app.
That's cool.
Yeah, so just people like that, people that they thought would be interested and also thought that they would write about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it caught on like wildfire.
Yeah, clearly. That's awesome.
It was pretty amazing. So their servers were going down all the time.
Oh.
They actually had one server. They admittedly it didn't really know what they were doing on the server side
Yeah.
at the time. But the good thing for them was the cellular networks at the time weren't that great. And I'm guessing this might have been around the time. Do you remember there was an iPhone that dropped calls like nonstop, and people didn't know why for like months or even like a year? And then Apple finally came out and said, "Oh, sorry guys, it's where you're holding the phone. The way it's designed is like if you hold it in a certain way, you're kind of blocking the
signal,
like the whatever the radio, and
receptors or something."
Yeah.
I do remember that. Wow.
So people were kind of blaming this technology was still fairly early, so they kept coming back, and I think that's how you know you have a really good product, right? Like it's crashing all the time.
Yeah.
People are blaming other things for it. But Kevin Systrom said, they always felt like they were going to fail, right? They just, even though they took off immediately, they had all these problems on the back end, and it just felt like they could never keep it up. But people didn't really care.
Aww.
They just kept coming back.
That's great.
So by December 2010, Instagram had 1 million users.
Oh my gosh, that's like what, 2 months, 3 months? October, November, December.
Yeah, a couple months after launch, they got up to 1 million users. Investors were showing up at their offices uninvited.
Oh my gosh, take my money.
Exactly. They were just trying to put their money into the company.
Wow.
So in February 2011, what's that, maybe 5 months after they launched, they raised $7 million of funding at a $25-ish million valuation.
Oh my gosh.
So it's funny listening back and like reading about what the founders were thinking at this time. They said there were 2 times they really felt like they were onto something. The first was in January 2011, so right before they took that round of funding. Snoop Dogg started using Instagram.
Nice. That's a brand ambassador for you.
Well, okay, if that's not good enough for you, then about a year later, President Obama signed up for Instagram and started using it as part of his second campaign.
Oh, wow. No, I mean, I was impressed with Snoop Dogg. Now I'm like super impressed.
So 1 year after launch, remember I said they were at about 1 million in December 2010?
Right.
Within a year later, they had grown to 10 million users.
Oh my gosh.
And
that is steep growth.
It's crazy. And all this time, the founders were just expecting growth to stall, right? Like, because you've heard before, like, products will take off, but then there will be, some point where it's just like
it just kind of tapers.
Yeah, it stops and you don't know why necessarily.
Right.
And it's hard to get to that next stage. And they were just waiting for that to happen.
Can I ask, were they like putting out new features on Instagram, like new filters, like throughout this year, or was it the same product the whole time?
No. They're constantly building new features.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I mean, if they weren't, they would have been doing a lot of things wrong. But
oh. Well, I didn't know if they were just like the app was what it was, and it just still kept growing.
Oh, no, not at all.
Okay, so good startups continue to add more things. Got it.
Yeah, I mean, they learn what their users like, what they don't like. They learn what keeps people coming back.
Right.
They learn what will get new users to sign up, and they keep doing those things. Instagram wasn't the only app to be in this space, of course. Even when they launched, there were other apps out there doing some components of these things. There were apps that did filters for photos. There were apps like Facebook, which was, not really mobile first yet. Also, didn't drive the product around photos. Twitter also allowed photos to be uploaded, but they were kind of secondary to text on the app.
Right.
But after other engineers saw the success of Instagram, they wanted in on the action. So other apps started popping up left and right. Some of them had millions or even tens of $1 million of funding before they even had a product launched.
Wow, because they just knew how successful that idea could be.
Yeah, they wanted in on that. And the investors, they didn't get in early enough on Instagram, so they said,
Right.
well, we'll back another company that will do the same thing.
Yeah.
And the founders of Instagram, I think they were a little worried about them at the time. But in hindsight, they didn't have too much to be worried about. Instagram kept growing, and by April 2012, it had 50 million users with only 13 employees.
Oh my gosh. Oh, that just seems like a very heavy caseload.
Well, yeah, they grew amazingly fast on the user side, and remarkably, they didn't have to add employees to scale to that number. 13 is such a low number of employees to have that many
know.
users.
My gosh.
And so at that same time, in April 2012, Facebook approached them about an acquisition. And, after some negotiation, they agreed on a price of $1 billion in cash and stock
Wow. For those 13 people.
for the company.
Yeah.
So, those 13 employees and the founders became Facebook employees. Actually, they kept Instagram running sort of as a subsidiary of Facebook. So the founders got to keep running the show. And Kevin and Mike actually stayed at Facebook until September 2018.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so they stayed for 6 years, over 6 years after the acquisition, which is kind of a long time for founders to stay
Yeah.
after their company gets acquired. But they did have, they could call most of the shots still, I think, on the product.
Yeah, right. It was still their baby.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they stayed until then. When they left, they they basically said they wanted to go work on something else.
Right.
Maybe take some time off and then start something else.
So I want to know, so are they forever friends?
Well, I don't know about forever, but they are still great friends.
Aw.
Kevin and Mike are.
Aw.
They are currently working on another startup called Artifact.
Okay.
I don't want to get into too much about what it does because maybe we'll talk about it on another episode.
Can I guess?
It's pretty new.
Based on the name Artifact?
Yeah, go for it.
You take a picture of something and then it tells you the history of where it came from.
Okay. Well, we'll find out. I can tell you that's not it, but great guess.
I'm like, why would somebody want that?
So today, just to wrap things up, Instagram has over 2 billion active users on the app. So that is like about a quarter of the world's population is on
Wow.
Instagram.
Yeah. Well, because you know what?
What?
It doesn't matter what language you speak. Pictures are universal
That is very true,
for
both
everyone.
in a odd cliche sort of way, like the way that you said it, and in a factual sort of way.